In this lesson, we're going to look at a different approach to adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing integers. And there are quite a few different approaches available. Happens to be the way that I think is the simplest. In order to understand it, we first have to look at the meaning of negative or opposite. So let's consider a negative 3. First of all, that in itself can be considered two different ways. As negative 3 on the number line, which is 3 to the left of 0, or as the negative of 3, which is related to the number 3, it's on the opposite side of 0 from the number 3, and it happens to be negative 3. So negative 3 is the negative of 3, too, the opposite of 3. Well, let's look at the opposite of negative 3 then. And we see that that is on the other side of 0 from negative 3, and it's positive 3. And then we'll look at the opposite of negative 3, which we just found, and that's on the other side of 0 from 3, and it's negative 3. And then we look at the opposite of that, which is the opposite of the opposite of 3, and that ends up being 3 again. And if we put another negative there, having 5 negatives out in front of 3, we're back to negative 3. And a sixth one, 6 negatives in front of 3, and we're back to 3 again. And so we come up with a rule that 1 negative, 3 negatives, 5 negatives in front of a number make it negative. So an odd number of negatives in front of a number result in a negative number. But an even number of negatives in front of a number seem to result in a positive number. And we can get a very lot of mileage from this particular rule. In fact, we can pretty much do add, subtract, multiply, and divide quite easily. But before we leave this discussion, let's talk about positive a minute. The way to write a positive 3 is usually just 3. If you put a positive sign in front of it, it's still 3. If you put another positive in front of it, it's like saying, yes, yes, it's 3. And you can put a whole bunch of them in front of it, and still nothing's happened to it. It's still 3. But if you stick one negative there, it becomes negative 3. So positives don't do anything, but negatives, they do a lot. They keep changing the meaning to the opposite side of 0. Okay, you can see that I've already written some rules up here for add and subtract. And they're really one set of rules that covers everything. And that's kind of the nice thing about this model. All right, so let me show you a few add problems, and then we'll switch and mix them up. Let's look at negative 3 plus negative 5. All right, and if we draw a balance, and we'll put the negative 3 on the negative side because it's negative, and then we'll put the 5 on the negative side, and we'll say which side is heavier. Well, the negative side certainly, so that's the sign of the answer. And how much heavier? It's got 8 on that side, nothing on the other side, so it's 8 heavier, and that's the answer. Okay, and you had to add the 3 and the 5 together to find out how much heavier it was. All right, so this model uses a picture, but normally I would say take those two signs in front of the 5 and replace them by a single negative, because a positive and negative is a negative, and take that to be the sign of the 5. Okay? And so just get one sign written and call it -3 and -5. In other words, we're kind of throwing subtraction out here. If you take the original problem, you could enter it into your calculator as -3 plus, open parentheses, -5, close parentheses, equal, and you'll get -8. But you could also enter it into the calculator as -3 minus 5 equals, and you'll get -8. All right, from this point on, we're going to get one sign in front of each number when we work. Suppose we add -3 and 5. All right, this time we have some positive and some negative. So we'll put the 3 on the negative and the 5 on the positive. And when we ask ourselves which side's heavier to find the sign, it's going to be positive. And let's write it down just to make sure we've asked that question. And then how much heavier? Well, there's 2 extra on that side. And the answer is +2. What happened to the other 3? They balanced off the -3. In fact, if we had -3 plus 3, we would have a situation that we call a zero balance. 3 negative and 3 positive don't tip either way. That's a zero balance. Okay. Deposit $3 and withdraw $3 immediately. It's as though nothing happened. 0. Okay. Now let's look at another subtraction. Let's look at 8 minus a -3. Okay, and this time we have one sign for each number. We've got to get one sign. 8's positive, so we'll just leave it the way it's written. But a negative in front of a 3 is a +3. And you don't even need a balance for this one. 8 plus 3 is 11. Let's look at another problem. How about a -8 minus a -3? And that would be written as -8 plus 3. And with a balance diagram, the 8 would be on the negative, the 3 would be on the positive. The negative side is heavier, so the answer is negative. And it's 5 heavier than the other side, so the answer is -5. All right, we can also use this to do a really long problem, like -8 minus a -11 plus 7 minus 4 plus a -3 minus 13 plus 5. And it's not that hard. It's actually quite easy, but the first thing you want to do is get one sign in front of each number. -8, +11, because negative both attach themselves to the 11 that follows them, plus 7, +7, -4, -3, plus a negative in front of a 3 would be just a -3, -13, plus 5. And then one of the beauties of this is that it's just one long addition problem, so we can do it in any order, so we do it all at once. Let's draw a balance over here where there's some room. Plus on one side, minus on the other. And the 8 goes on the negative, the 11 on the positive, the 7 on the positive, the 4 on the negative, the 3 on the negative, the 13 on the negative, and the 5 on the positive. See how much negative you have all together. These are like all your withdrawals, and this could be versus the deposits. All right, 13 and 3 is 16, and 4 is 20, and 8 is 28. 5 and 7 is 12, and 11 is 23. So you have 28 negative and 23 positive. So the balance is going to be a negative 5 because you have 5 more negative than you do positive. And that's how you add or subtract. I want to show you one example that I especially like, and then we'll be finished. Before we see the example, let me add one other thing, and that is that you really should draw the sketch of the balance for a while, at least while you're working on the problems on add and subtract, because that is how you get that image into your brain. It's something to do with hand-eye coordination and memory. At any rate, it's a really good model. It makes the rules very simple. Okay, here's the problem I like. At year's end, your new consignment business shows a balance of negative $5,500, which means that you still have debts to pay off from starting the business. While out shopping for holiday gifts, you run into a friend who loaned you money for the business. He said that he is feeling especially good today because he just won $5 million in the lottery yesterday. He is giving you a gift. You don't have to pay back the $2,000 that you owe him. How does this affect your year-end balance? Let's look at it. You start with a year-end balance of negative $5,500, which means that you have that much indebtedness still in your company. And then you run into this friend who decides to take away a debt that you owe him, which is a negative, because it's a debt, $2,000. Taking away that debt is just as though he had handed you $2,000 to pay him with, okay? And so you now have negative $5,500 plus $2,000. And you can see the negative side is still heavier here by $3,500, but your debts have decreased by $2,000.